Hi there everyone, sorry we're back for part 2 of the palette card. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I had a notification come in on the top of my phone because I'd forgotten to turn the notifications off, and in trying to dismiss the notifications so it wasn't recorded for you all to read because it wasn't anything to do with card making, I accidentally swiped the page and we ended up cancelling the video. So rather than start all over again, watch part 1 and then come on and watch part 2. So where we got to on part 1 was that we had used our piece of cardstock, we had run the front of it through the wood embossing folder, we had cut off 5 strips of 1/2 inch from the front of the card, and then we'd reassembled the card. Oh, here we go again. We'd reassembled the card with 2 downwards pieces and then the remaining 3 going across the card. And I don't know if you can see here, but I put a bit too much glue on and it's squidged out. So I'm going to show you how we're going to fix that. If it doesn't get covered up completely, then we'll take it off with a glue rubber. And then what I went ahead and did is I used some of the stamps from the Vintage Tools stamp set, and I just randomly stamped just to make my own cardstock. If you have got a stamp set that you really like and there is no DSP to go with it, which there wasn't with this, you can always make your own backing papers by doing this. It's sort of like a one sheet wonder, but not exactly the same because you're not going to chop it up into different card sizes. Now I started with the right size for the width, and what I need to do is just trim this down. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off the tools that I stamped at the bottom, because we need some that we're going to fussy cut to put on the front of the card. So I stamped a hammer, a chisel and a plane. So just to make sure I get a nice neat edge, I'm going to actually cut them off like that, and we're going to cut those out. So I'll just put those to one side. Now what we do need to do is we need to measure how big a piece we need on the top here, and I'll do it in centimeters because the card's in centimeters, and we just want to cover up most of that glue if we can. So it's looking like about 5 centimeters. As I said before, the cardstock is already the right width, so what I'm going to do is just cut off 5 centimeters. And then, as I said, I did a bit more because I'm cheating and making up kits while I'm talking to you. Okay, so I hate it when that happens. My blades obviously need changing somewhat. Okay, so that's it. We'll move that trimmer out of the way again now. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this part, and this is going to fit on here. But one thing I do want to do is I just want to put a little bit of blending around the edge, because I didn't do that. You can see I put a much smaller section on here. I actually cut 6 strips off this card, but it took up too much room, I think, and then this bit was very small, which I wanted it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just reaching over for a blending brush. Oh, one thing I am pleased to be able to tell you is that the smaller size of blending brushes are going over into the new annual catalogue. So if you haven't managed to get some from the seasonal catalogue, then you will be able to purchase them in the annual catalogue. And I'm just going to add a little bit of colour, because otherwise I felt this was just really stark white compared to the card base, because nothing else is white on this card base. Okay, so I've just gone over that just to give that sort of an aged, antiqued look. Okay, and we're going to stick that onto the front of our card. So this piece is 10 centimeters by 5. Okay, and that's just going to go slightly over the top of our palette. And that's covered up most of that mess I made with the glue, but I'll get the rest of that off when it's dry with a glue rubber. In fact, it might be dry enough now if I can find my glue rubber. Actually don't know what I've done with my glue rubber, so I can't take that off. But anyway, oh no, here it is. Here's my trusty glue rubber. I'm just going to very gently, because we don't want to rip the cardstock, just take that off, and it comes off quite quickly. I'm being firm but gentle. And then you just end up with these sort of bobbly bits on the edges, so I just pull those off. You can trim them off with a pair of scissors if you really need to, but I find they pull off easy enough. Okay, and just get those last bits off, and that's that boo-boo fixed. Okay, So you can see if I hold up this piece, if we'd have put this white just on the brown, it just would have been far too stark, and I wanted that vintagey feel. So that's why we've done it like that. Okay, then what we need to do, we need to put an insert in the card. And while we've still got our stamps out, I'm just going to bring in a piece of basic white, and I'm just going to stamp the plain, because there's a really good sentiment that says you're plain awesome. Okay, and this will probably end up being my dad's Father's Day card, which I felt the sentiment was quite appropriate, but just in case I don't give it to him, I'll stamp the sentiment later. So I'm just going to glue that in. Again, I'm using some Tombow multi-purpose liquid adhesive to give it its proper name. You can obviously use a tape runner or for sticking things like this in, but I would always advise to use a wet glue when it comes to sticking embossed cardstock down, because it does really need that to soak into the texture. Okay, that's that. So now what we need to do is we need to bring in our tools and a pair of snips, and this is where I wish I had learned how to speed up my videos. So actually I better just put my glasses on or I'll end up chopping off the edge. I don't wear my glasses very often, just for close-up things like threading a needle. My eyesight has changed as I've got older, and I didn't really ever have any eyesight problems as a child, apart from the fact that I have something called scotopic sensitivity, or Mears-Erland syndrome. If you haven't heard of that, it's not dyslexia at all, but what happens is the black and white is difficult to read, particularly when it's written in lines. So I always struggled when I was at school. We didn't have whiteboards, it was blackboards and chalk. And I always struggled at school in my exams, I always got predicted grades higher than I actually achieved in my exams. And it wasn't because I was lazy and didn't revise, because I spent ages revising, but black print on white paper is really difficult for me to read. And I didn't even know about this until my children were diagnosed with it when they were small, and they actually had coloured overlays and coloured glasses. My son actually jumped, he was about 4.5, 5. He hadn't long started school, so we start school at just turned 4 for some children in the UK. Far too early in my opinion, but there you go, I'm not a politician, so there's not a lot I can do about it. Anyway, yes, so he actually jumped two reading schemes because the teachers kept telling me he was lazy and couldn't read and all the rest of it, and wasn't bothered and didn't want to try, typical boy, all the rest of it. But what it actually was that he couldn't, because when he read black on white, the words used to jumble themselves up. And that is a classic sign of dyslexia. And unfortunately, my eldest child, my daughter, she actually is dyslexic with Mears-Erland syndrome. So it's been doubly hard for her, bless her. But you find ways of coping with it. And I've always been an avid reader. And it wasn't until the children were tested that they actually tested me as well, and found that I've got it as well. And I've just managed to cope with it over the years. When I'm very tired, if I'm reading an actual paper book, then sometimes I find I have what's called rivers, which is where the text tends to sort of clump itself in islands, and then the river parts are the bits in between. So it's like looking at a map of a wetland, I suppose. Right, so I have to use my glasses when I'm cutting stuff out, particularly on white card. Okay, so we've got a plane, we've got a hammer, and we've got a chisel. Now, the reason for these, a lot of these cards that I've seen have had flowers, or they've been like a trellis, so they've had flowers or things like that going up of it. And it does need, because we've cut the front of this apart, it has weakened it, obviously. So it does need a little bit of stabilising. And I found that if you use, well, I use the bigger tools in this set, or the longer tools, and it doesn't matter, you can use whichever tools you want, but I found, oh, and I've just done exactly what I'm about to tell you not to do, and that's to put glue all the way down it, because we don't want it going through. So what I'm going to have to do is just turn that over and wipe that glue off there. Okay. Yes, so anyway, we found by using the slightly larger tools and putting them across the card so they span more than one of the struts, that that helps strengthen the front of the card. So my next tip was going to be to tell you not to put glue all over the back of whatever it is you're sticking on, because we don't want it to go through, and to put the glue where you actually want to stick the thing. So I want my plane to be on there. I'm putting that at an angle again so it spans the front of the card. And then what I'm going to do, let's move that over a tad so it's not sticking out. Then what I'm going to do is just lift up the back of the plane and just pop a little bit of glue down there. Okay, and then we've got our chisel, which is quite small, but again, we're going to use that to span across two sections like that. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue there, and we're going to attach the handle to that. Okay, and then I'm just going to put a little bit more glue there. Hopefully you can see this. And then we can attach the blade of the chisel. Now, something else I did on my original card, sorry, I have the most untidy desk in the world. Something else I did on my original card was, I don't know if it'll catch up on here, you can see a little bit of sort of shimmer there and a little bit of shimmer on the head of the hammer. You can't really see very well, but basically what I used was some Sizzix gilding wax. And these come in pots. I've got a gold and a silver. These come in pots, and you can actually use your finger, but I find it easier to use the end of a cotton bud. And all I've done is just dipped the end of the cotton bud into that, just to add a little bit of metallic onto the tools where I thought the metallic would be. But I'm not going to do that on this card, but you obviously, that's just, we unfortunately Stampin' Up don't sell that, which is why I've got a Sizzix one, but just added a little bit of something I felt. Okay, so there's our finished card. I'm really sorry that you have to watch this video in two pieces. As I said, I'm a bit technically inept, so I really need to learn how to edit my videos as well, so I could edit that out. Anyway, hope you like the card, and I hope you'll give it a try. And always happy to receive your comments on my videos on YouTube. And if you've had a go at the card and you want to show me what you've made, pop over to my Facebook page, which is also the Crafty Yellow Camper, and send me a picture. And I'm sure anybody else would love to see what you've made as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Happy stamping!